everyone. I am Noelle Rollins and welcome to the nose shading lesson. So today we are going to work on shading noses, how to make them realistic looking. Noses actually don't have too many lines in them. It's mostly comprised of shading to imply lines. So we're going to break down step by step on 3 different noses today. So let's get started. Today we're going to have so much fun making 3 realistic looking noses with shading. All right, let's get started.
All right, so I have my paper. I have a 2H drawing pencil, an 8B drawing pencil, and you can just use a regular school pencil as well. I have a blender. If you do not have blenders, you can use cotton swabs. I always like to keep my pencils as sharp as possible, and any eraser will do, as well as if you want to use the one that is on your pencil, that is just fine as well. The whole goal today is to just have some fun. Let's relax while we draw and just enjoy seeing a different way to draw noses outside of maybe a way we've learned before. So I always try to start at my darkest places when I draw. It helps give me contrast to the paper so I can see the darkest and then know that the paper will be the lightest. So typically with noses, that's around the edges of the nostrils and then into the holes of the nose, into the nostrils. So I'm using the darker 8B pencil right here. And I don't keep that line too firm on the bottom, but I try to have it be a sharp line on the top, if you can see what I'm saying. So where the edge of the nose is and then it disappears into darkness, that part is a little bit straighter, but as it's coming out of the bottom of the nostrils, it's going to be a little more blended, typically. So just very lightly with the pencil. I am barely touching the paper, and you can go in straight lines, or I tend to do little tiny circles a lot of times when I'm doing faces, and it just helps give that illusion of pores and skin cells and all sorts of things. So just little tiny circular motions. So these are where the highlights are going to be, where I'm kind of implying there. So I'm going to avoid as much as possible putting any pencil in those areas. So I'm just slowly going to go through and shade under the nose here. Really lightly. The trick with shading noses is do not go too dark right away. Keep it very light-handed. Just plan on with drawing in general and colored pencils. I tend to just know that it's going to take longer, but I stick with doing lighter pencil strokes. So now I'm just slowly building up away from the bottom of the nose, following the shading really right now in the center of the nose. You can imagine how it comes out to a point right above here, so it's going to just get lighter and lighter. So I'm going to kind of keep that circle part pretty, like I'm going to try to avoid it. So sometimes when you get to an area where you have to do a little bit lighter, it can help to come in with a harder pencil, which is more of your H pencils. The downside to that is you can see that it shows the pencil marks more. And so sometimes what seems like a great tool can actually be kind of frustrating because it's hard to work with it. So I'm just doing literally the lightest touch that I can, barely putting any pressure at all here. So now I'm coming back in with the 8B And doing the same pressure, it just comes out a little darker when you use the softer pencils. And that bridge of the nose, so I'm going to start implying that it's rounded by how I shade it here. So as we come off of the edge, we'll just do a slight darkening with the shading to imply that that's the edge of the nose. We're hardly doing anything at all, and you're going to see that's going to start to come together here, that you can say, oh, there's the bridge of the nose. I can see it now. Just really lightly kind of up where the bridge of the nose will start to meet the eyebrow area. So now we're going to leave the highlighted area where I'm showing here. We're going to do really lightly underneath to just how the light's reflecting off of the edge of the nostril there. Just small circular strokes. Occasionally, if I notice that my edges are getting lost or blended out, I come back in and just darken them up a little bit like that. Especially as you can start to see the rest of the balance of the intensity of the drawing. So now very light strokes start going up the bridge of the nose and around, avoiding those parts that are going to be highlighted. So I'm going to start implying the other side of the bridge of the nose. It's very light. We're going to come through with a blender after this too, and you'll see how I kind of blend it out. I love the look of both ways, where it's rough like this and you can see the pencil strokes. And then sometimes it's nice to just smooth everything out by blending it. So it's totally your choice, but I want you to know how to do both. So this is fun. You can kind of show if someone has a larger bump on their nose, this part might be a little bit more highlighted. If they have more of an inward curve to their nose, it may not be as highlighted. So the key to drawing for me is just light, easy. Have fun with it, very light hand. So here with the cotton swab, I'm going to start in the lighter places and kind of blend out, knowing that whatever I pick up on this cotton swab is going to drag across into the next part. So you don't want to start in the darkest place and then drag it into your lighter spots. So I'm just working my way out. I'm kind of implying here, just in circular motions. I'm sticking pretty much with the way that I shaded it. In some spots I realized that, I can fill that in a little bit. So I just used whatever dust was picked up on the cotton swab to kind of give that shadowing and shading. So I'm showing the tip of the nose here, but leaving that highlighted. If you ever accidentally go too far, you can grab your eraser and just re-erase that part. That's the really nice thing about working in pencil, is you can erase it and just do it again. So there's just absolutely no reason to stress out. Instead, it's all just a work in progress. So simple. And then after I blended it, I felt like I wanted to come in and just redefine a little bit more. So very, very lightly with the 8B, I'm coming in now and just re-establishing some of those more shadowed places, just to really help re-show the curve of the bridge of the nose, kind of coming up. Sometimes right above where my pencil is there will actually be a little bit of a highlight where your cheek starts to meet your nose. So you'll notice that as you're looking at references. Kind of above, some people have the fold when they smile where their cheeks kind of come in, and then above that would be highlighted. So now I'm just going in and darkening the darkest spots. I think one of the biggest things that I see with new artists is they're afraid to go dark with their pencil. And so drawings end up very light. One of the biggest tips I can give you to have just more advanced looking art is to not be afraid to use the whole spectrum of light to dark. So we have very dark spots on here and very light spots, and then we fill the entire range, and that's what's going to give you that advanced look. All right, let's be in nose number 2. As always, you could pause this video and finish up nose number 1 if you need extra time. We're going to do 3 noses in this video, so you can just see a few varieties of skin tones and styles here. And just different shapes of noses. So again, I'm left-handed. That's why I typically start on the right side of the nose and work my way back as much as possible. It may be more comfortable for you if you're right-handed to do the other side when you're drawing. There's no exact science to it, just what makes you most comfortable. Often if I'm doing a larger drawing like this with pencil, I will put a piece of paper down under my hand so that I'm not constantly smearing the work that I've just done. So here I'm going to show just a little bit of below the nose, how it meets the upper lip. Just a little bit. I'm doing those small, circular, as light as possible pencil strokes. I'm using the 8B pencil, so the pencil just goes on so nicely onto the paper. I am using just a basic drawing sketch pad. As you get drawing more, you can experiment with different types of paper. Some have more of a tooth to them that'll really give you this textured look. I like using Bristol board as well. That's very smooth and allows you to really have control over the shading and the smoothness of that. So as light as I possibly can touch, I'm just slowly starting to round out how the tip of the nose is going to be. And as you'll start doing this, it's always a little bit more, I don't want to say stressful, but as you're watching and trying to learn something or repeat what someone else is doing, that is the most stressful part of, I think, about art. But as you're doing it yourself, this part is where you put on a good movie in the background or some fun music, some calming music, and you just let your mind go off into the creativity world. You just sit here and you just meditatively focused. It's such a gift. It's like it just lets your brain rest and tap into that creative part. And it's such a gift. Drawing for me often, especially when I was younger, I would come home from junior high and even elementary school. I started drawing, especially in high school as well. Just, it was an escape for me. If I felt like school had gone rough that day or somebody was upset with me about something, or I had 5 kids in my family, so maybe it was the one way that I could just have some alone time. But it was always just a nice escape, that it's something I knew that no one could take from me, and I always had this to come to and just work on. So you can see there I really started to establish a darker edge. How I talked about in the last nose, how you really want to start to have the full range from light to dark. With pencils, you always, if you have a choice, you want to go up in pencil as far as from 2B to 4B to 6B. So when I use the 8B, it gives that darker look and I don't have to press as hard. As we all know, when you take a regular pencil and you press hard, it just gets shiny. So what drawing pencils do is they help you avoid that shininess. And instead, with the softer lead inside the pencil, it just smoothly goes onto the paper darker. So you can see the bridges of the nose here that I'm applying, the cheek lines. So every part of me wants to just continue this drawing, as you can see, into the cheeks and just keep showing you. Because there's no exact ending to the nose. It starts and where it ends, there's cheeks. And so it's hard to give the full picture how to draw a nose without overlapping a little bit into the other areas of the face. So now when you see this, you can see there is very few lines on this nose. On the edges there where I'm working now, but then the entire middle of the nose is just with shading. And the key is just, like I said, layers of light touch. And if you go too dark, you come in with an eraser. You don't stress about it. And add just a little bit more. And depending on what way the light is coming from, one side might be darker than the other. Just using kind of the edge of the pencil there, somewhat at a slanted way. Not the complete side, but it gives me a little bit more pencil lead on the paper. And just doing large oval, very, very light pencil strokes. And you can see even the difference still with this nose versus the last one once we smooth that last one out. They both have a fun, unique look to them, and different times, depending on the look you want in your artwork. Different styles will feel like a better fit for you. There are some advantages sometimes to keeping things rough looking. You can portray frustration or anger, a feeling of roughness, unknown, by not having everything smooth and perfect. And then just the opposite, when you are wanting to portray more of a calm, happy, uplifting, sort of perfect moment, sometimes the smoother look can work for that. So now here I am going through and doing this circle. And right now, like that could look like, oh, let's panic, because obviously that looks so bold how the tip of the nose is. But don't worry. It's all about trusting the process as we slowly work up. You can see him going up and down, and then I do a slight curve as I go over the bridge of the nose, a slight curve as I come off of the nose. Really just working with the way that the skin texture and flows. So we'll come in and then we'll just drag that color inward slightly. Just really lightly again, drag it inward. So you can see just pretty simple, and we are able to, I'm just showing that I'm getting a clean part of the cotton swab, and I'm dragging a little bit of that out. The key is that you're going to want to keep an eye out for is to not get every part of the paper so saturated. How I talked about before, that often we work too lightly, and then what can start to happen is you work too darkly, or too dark, where everything is covered in pencil. The key is just to notice the contrast, to leave some areas lighter, and that's what's going to show the highlight and the lowlights. Coming back in here just a little bit to redefine some of these parts. I just sharpened the pencil so I have a nice sharp edge. And already just that alone starts to just really show the edges of that nose and nostrils so much better. The key is always just taking a step back. Once you're to this point when you're drawing a nose on your own, you're going to want to just stop for a second, take a look, and just say, okay, is that looking how I'd like it to? Is there a bridge of the nose? Is there symmetry? And like when you look at this nose, it's not exactly symmetrical, and that's very normal. When you start looking at noses, almost no one has a symmetrical nose. Almost always one side is a little lower than the other. One nostril opens a little bit differently than the other. It's very normal to have that. And we don't have to be super dramatic about it, but it just is how it is. So now I'm just coming in with this fine blender. If you have one, you can do this. If you don't even worry about it. It's just blending those lines out just a touch. Nice and easy. So that is nose number 2. I wanted to come in here. I felt like I had darkened up the little bit of the tip. Too much. I'm just barely tapping the eraser on the paper. And what will happen is you might end up with a really sharp eraser line. And so then you just come back through with your blender and you can kind of smooth it back out, or your pencil or your finger. So just kind of smooth it how you had it. How are we feeling about noses? Are you enjoying them more? Are you impressing yourself with they are indeed doable? All right, go ahead and pause the video if you need just a little bit more time to finish up either of those noses. This last one we're going to do is a little different, and it's the quickest of the 3. Wanted to come in and do a completely different angle of the nose. So I'll come in and I just want to show you too, just kind of sketching it out. This is where the line drawing practice we had can be very helpful. I had one sketch there and I realized it was too close to the other ones that I just worked on. So I didn't want to. We have all this paper to work with. We don't need them that close. What I just did there was I used a paintbrush that's dry and has no paint on it, of course, to brush away the eraser pieces. So that's a trick that you can always use as well, so we don't get any on our hands. So again, I'm going to come in with my 8B pencil and do the darkest spots of the nose, which, as you can see, the pattern here is around the curves, the backside of the nostrils. I should look up what the technical term is for those little side parts of the nose. And then here we go. We're doing the circular strokes again. The nice thing, if you know you're going to blend it, you can get away with, you can see I sometimes get impatient. And I'll start doing a few kind of lightning bolt style zigzags. You can get away with it a bit more when you know you're going to blend it, because you'll kind of smear those together. But it is hard when you have pencil strokes that are too bold in direct lines. It's hard to make those disappear. So here I am. The only lines that'll actually show now in the nose are already drawn. Now the rest we're going to imply with shading. So I'm kind of laying out around where parts of it will be highlighted and leaving some of that. And just filling in a little bit. So this is where I'm just very lightly kind of avoiding the tip of the nose and just slowly filling in this in-between part to start to establish how the nose is curved. Up the side of the bridge of the nose still is going to be shaded. The only time this would be any different is if you had like a flashlight shining directly on this person's nose from this angle, then the highlights would be in a little bit different place. But assuming that they are looking somewhat at the light source and their nose is turned to the side, that's what we're shading. So now that I started to establish with shading, I want to come in and erase the bridge of the nose a little bit. And it's going to be very lightly shaded. And in fact, some of how typically in a drawing I would show that part of the nose is actually how behind it is shaded. So like I'm showing like where you would be shading the eye socket and the cheek behind it. So that part's darker, and therefore the bridge of the nose just in contrast is shown. So you don't need to draw all this other part. I just wanted to show you, just as it starts to fit into the whole face, how this becomes even easier to kind of fit them together. So I'm curious, for those of you that do draw or do other creative things, do you typically put music on? Do you like to watch movies? I love putting on the BBC 5-hour version of Pride and Prejudice. That's one of my favorites. I think something that I've seen so many times before is always fun to have on in the background. I'd love to hear, though, if you have a playlist or a favorite song or artist or style of music or movies. What do you listen to or watch when you do things like that? I'm always looking for suggestions, so. Back in my 20s, I remember sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, and I'd have HGTV on, and I'd watch these house decorating shows while I would draw and work on school and work, and just dreaming of someday having a home that I would get to decorate. And I'm coming in again with this cotton swab just very lightly. You can see I'm just doing small circular strokes over a bunch of the areas as well to just keep it from getting straight lines where I can. So where I feel like it's going to matter that you want the organic kind of curved lines, then I try to be really aware of how I drag the cotton swab around, working with the flow. So I love the sketchy look on these noses, how they look. Both very detailed and also just nice and sketchy. So in the next video, we're going to work with a basic set of colored pencils, and we're going to go through and draw a nose. And I'm going to show you exactly what order to draw each colored pencil, how to do like stroke by stroke to build up the colors that you need for the nose. So I thank you for joining me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.